The crack of a rifle echoed through the dawn, silencing every creature for miles in the rugged frontier town of Redemption, Arizona Territory, 1876. Jessamine Jones wiped dust from her sweat-slicked brow as she peered through the small window of the dilapidated shack she called home, watching her younger sister Eliza feed the chickens in the yard. They'd been alone since their father died in the silver mines last winter, and the vultures were already circling. Redemption was the kind of place where hope came to die, where desperate souls clung to the promise of silver and gold, only to find themselves in debt to men far worse than any they'd left behind in the East. The mining company had given them 3 months to vacate after their father's death. Those 3 months had passed 2 weeks ago. "Eliza, come inside now," Jessamine called, her eyes fixed on the horizon where dust clouds betrayed approaching riders. Eliza, barely 18 with their mother's golden hair and their father's stubborn chin, scooped up the last handful of feed and hurried toward the door. "Who's coming, Jess?" "No one good." Jessamine's hand trembled slightly as she pulled her sister inside and bolted the door. "The Donovan brothers. They've been buying up all the foreclosed properties and they're not just after land," Eliza finished, her face paling. "Everyone knows they've been shipping young women to the brothels in Santa Fe." Jessamine nodded grimly. Their small town had witnessed 3 young women disappear over the past month, all from families that couldn't pay their debts. The Donovan brothers called it alternative payment arrangements, while the local sheriff looked the other way, his pockets lined with silver. "I won't let them take you," Jessamine promised, gripping her sister's shoulders. At 22, she'd become both mother and father to Eliza since their parents' passing. "We'll find a way out of this." The approaching hoofbeats grew louder, and Jessamine's heart pounded against her ribs. She glanced at her father's old shotgun above the fireplace, knowing it contained only 1 shell, not enough to hold off the Donovans and their men. "If they come in, you run out the back and head for Widow Miller's place," Jessamine instructed. "She'll hide you." Eliza's blue eyes widened. "I'm not leaving you." "You will if I tell you to," Jessamine replied firmly, just as the hoofbeats stopped outside their door. 3 sharp knocks rattled the weathered wood. "Jones ladies," came a smooth, oily voice they recognized as belonging to Warren Donovan, the elder brother. "I'm afraid your grace period has expired. Time to discuss your arrangements." Jessamine took a deep breath and moved toward the door, squeezing Eliza's hand once before dropping it. "Stay back," she whispered. When she opened the door, Warren Donovan stood on their porch, flanked by his younger brother Cecil and 2 hired guns. Warren's expensive suit seemed obscenely out of place in their dusty yard, his gold watch chain catching the morning sun. "Miss Jones," he tipped his hat with mock courtesy, "I trust you've had time to consider our proposition." "We need more time, Mr. Donovan," Jessamine said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Just 1 more month and we'll have enough to—" Warren's laugh cut her off. "Your father owed the mining company $200 when he died. With interest in the extended grace period we've so generously provided, that figure now stands at $350. His cold eyes examined her face. "Unless you've suddenly struck gold in your backyard, I believe we need to discuss alternatives." Behind him, Cecil Donovan's gaze slid past Jessamine to where Eliza stood in the shadows. The younger Donovan brother licked his lips, and Jessamine felt sick. "I can work," Jessamine said quickly. "I can cook and clean at your boarding house. I'll work off the debt in a year." "A year?" Warren raised an eyebrow. "My dear, at current rates, that would take you nearly 5 years of servitude." He glanced at his brother. "However, we might be able to clear your debt much faster if both Jones sisters were to work for us." Eliza stepped forward then, her voice surprisingly steady. "We won't be separated." Warren smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Who said anything about separation? In fact, you'll be traveling together. We have associates in Santa Fe who pay handsomely for fresh faces. Pretty sisters like yourselves could clear your father's debt in a matter of weeks." Jessamine's blood turned to ice. "We're not leaving Redemption." "I'm afraid you don't have a choice," Warren said, his pretense of civility evaporating. He nodded to his men. Collect their belongings, anything of value. The hired guns pushed past Jessamine into the house, rough hands grabbing at their few possessions. One man yanked their father's pocket watch from the mantelpiece, while the other took down the shotgun. "That's our father's!" Eliza cried, lunging forward only to be caught by Cecil Donovan, whose fingers dug painfully into her arm. "Let her go," Jessamine demanded, trying to pull her sister away, but Warren grabbed her by the hair. "The coach leaves for Santa Fe tomorrow morning," he informed them, his breath hot against Jessamine's ear. "You'll both be on it. Consider yourselves fortunate some girls get sent much farther away." Jessamine struggled against his grip, tears of rage and fear burning her eyes. "The law won't let you get away with this." Warren laughed again. "The law? Sheriff Davis is enjoying a fine new saddle courtesy of our business arrangement. No one's coming to save you, Miss Jones." Just then, a new sound cut through the commotion, the distinct click of a revolver's hammer being pulled back. "I believe the lady asked you to let her sister go." The voice was deep, steady, and unmistakably dangerous. Everyone froze, turning toward the open doorway where a tall figure stood silhouetted against the morning light. Yancey Orwell had ridden into Redemption 3 days earlier, a stranger with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. He'd kept to himself at the saloon, speaking little but observing everything, the kind of man other men gave a wide berth to, sensing the coiled danger beneath his calm exterior. Now he stood in the doorway of the Jones homestead, his Colt revolver aimed steadily at Warren Donovan's head. Dust coated his denim and leather, and the silver star pinned to his vest gleamed in the sunlight, a federal marshal's badge. "This is a private business matter," Warren said, his voice less confident than before. "You have no jurisdiction here, stranger." Yancey stepped fully into the room, his eyes never leaving Warren's face. "Federal marshals have jurisdiction everywhere in the territories." His gaze flicked briefly to the frightened sisters. "Release them. Now." Cecil's grip on Eliza loosened slightly, but Warren held firm to Jessamine. "These women owe a debt. The mining company. The Blackwater Mining Company was dissolved last month for fraudulent practices," Yancey interrupted. "Any debts claimed by their associates are null and void." His aim didn't waver. "I'm not going to say it again. Let them go." Warren's face contorted with rage. But before he could respond, the thunder of approaching horses filled the air. Through the open door, they could see half a dozen riders galloping toward the house, all wearing badges. Warren cursed, shoving Jessamine away from him with such force that she stumbled into the table. "This isn't over," he snarled, backing toward the door. "Oh, I think it is," Yancey replied calmly. His eyes shifted to Cecil, who still held Eliza's arm. "They tried to sell her sister, too," he said to no one in particular as he leveled his gun. "Not today." Cecil released Eliza as if she'd burned him, following his brother out the door. The hired guns dropped the sisters' possessions and hastily retreated. Yancey kept his revolver trained on the men until they'd mounted their horses and ridden away, the approaching lawmen turning to follow them. Only then did he holster his weapon and turn to the sisters. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes softening as they scanned Jessamine's face. She shook her head, pulling Eliza close. "No, but who are you? How did you know?" "Marshal Yancey Orwell," he replied, removing his hat. "I've been tracking the Donovans across 3 territories. They're wanted for human trafficking, among other crimes." He hesitated. "I heard rumors in town about their activities here and thought I should check on the families they were targeting." Eliza, still trembling, looked up at him. "Are they really going to prison?" "If I have anything to say about it," Yancey confirmed. "The territorial governor has authorized a special tribunal to handle their case. Too many girls have disappeared." Jessamine slowly regained her composure, though her heart still raced. "What about our home? Our father's debt?" "As I said, the mining company's claims were fraudulent," Yancey explained. "They've been falsifying debts, driving people off their land to claim mineral rights. Your father likely didn't owe them anything. Relief washed over Jessamine, so powerful she nearly sagged against the wall. Thank you, Marshal. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't arrived when you did. Something flickered in his eyes, a darkness quickly masked. I've seen what happens. That's why I'm here. He glanced around the small home. Do you have family nearby? Someone who can stay with you until this is resolved? Jessamine shook her head. No, it's just us since our father died. Yancey nodded thoughtfully. I'll have one of my deputies stationed nearby for a few days, just to be safe. The Donovans still have allies in town. As he turned to leave, Eliza suddenly spoke. Will you stay for supper, Marshal? It's the least we can do to thank you. Jessamine saw a moment of surprise cross the Marshal's weathered face, followed by something that might have been longing. How long had this man been on the trail, hunting monsters like the Donovans? How long since he'd enjoyed a home-cooked meal in civil company? I wouldn't want to impose, he said, though his hesitation suggested otherwise. Please, Jessamine found herself saying, we insist. For the first time, Yancey Orwell's stern expression softened into something approaching a smile. In that case, I'd be honored. None of them could have known then how that simple meal would change the course of their lives. Over the following day, Marshal Orwell became a regular visitor to the Jones homestead. He was often accompanied by Deputy Marshal Thomas Flynn, a freckle-faced young man who blushed whenever Eliza spoke to him. Together, they provided updates on the case against the Donovans, who were being held in the territorial prison awaiting trial. Jessamine learned that Yancey had been tracking human traffickers for 3 years, ever since a gang similar to the Donovans had kidnapped women from his hometown in Texas. His pursuit had become something of a personal crusade, and his reputation for relentless justice had spread throughout the frontier. The trial will be in Phoenix next month, he explained one evening as they sat on the small porch after supper. Eliza had gone inside to wash the dishes, leaving Jessamine alone with the marshal. You'll both need to testify. Jessamine nodded, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire. We'll be there. Yancey's gaze lingered on her profile. It won't be easy. Men like the Donovans have friends in high places. I'm not afraid of them, Jessamine replied, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. You're one of the bravest women I've ever met, Yancey said quietly. Standing up to them like that, ready to sacrifice yourself for your sister. Jessamine turned to him, surprised by the admiration in his voice. I did what anyone would do. No, he said firmly. Most people would have broken under that kind of pressure. You didn't. His words warmed something inside her that had been cold since her father's death. For months she'd been consumed with mere survival, with keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table. There had been no time for feelings, for dreams, for anything beyond the next day's struggles. Yet sitting there with Yancey Orwell, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Jessamine felt something awakening that she'd thought long buried hope. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Yancey was on his feet in an instant, hand on his holster, as he stepped in front of Jessamine. Relief washed over his face when Deputy Flynn rode into view. Marshal, Flynn called, dismounting hastily. Urgent news from Phoenix. The judge has moved up the Donovan hearing to next week. Yancey frowned. Why the rush? Flynn glanced uneasily at Jessamine before continuing. There's been pressure from certain quarters, and 2 of our witnesses from Yuma have mysteriously recanted their testimonies. The implications hung heavy in the air. The Donovans' influence reached further than they'd thought. I'll ride to Phoenix tomorrow, Yancey decided. We need to secure our remaining witnesses. He turned to Jessamine. You and Eliza should come with me. I don't trust your safety here anymore. Jessamine felt a chill despite the warm evening. You think they'd try something? Even with the deputies watching? Yancey's expression was grim. I wouldn't put anything past them. And I'd never forgive myself if something happened to you because I wasn't here. The intensity in his eyes as he spoke those words, made Jessamine's breath catch. For a moment they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Flynn cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'll, check on the horses," he mumbled, retreating to give them privacy. "We'll be ready at first light," Jessamine said softly. Yancey nodded but didn't move away. "Jessamine, He hesitated, seeming to struggle with words. "I want you to know that after this is over, after the trial, I'll make sure you and Eliza are settled somewhere safe." Something in his tone made her heart sink. "You make it sound like you'll be leaving." "My job is to follow these cases wherever they lead," he explained, his voice tight. "There are other Donovans out there, other girls in danger." "Of course," Jessamine said, trying to mask her disappointment. What had she expected? That a man like Yancey Orwell would settle down in a place like Redemption, that he'd give up his mission for a woman he barely knew. Yet the way he looked at her told a different story than his words. "We should prepare for tomorrow," she said, rising from her seat. "Thank you for your protection, Marshal." As she turned to go inside, his hand caught hers, warm and calloused. "Jessamine," he said, her name almost a whisper on his lips. "I didn't expect to find someone like you out here, someone who makes me wonder if there could be more to life than chasing outlaws." Her heart quickened. "Is that what you want? More to life?" "I never thought I did," he admitted. "Not until now." Before either could say more, a shot rang out in the darkness, the bullet splintering the wood of the porch post inches from Yancey's head. In one fluid motion, he pulled Jessamine down, shielding her with his body as more shots peppered the house. "Flynn!" Yancey shouted, drawing his revolver. "Behind the barn!" came the deputy's response, followed by the crack of his rifle. Eliza screamed from inside the house. "Stay down!" Yancey ordered Jessamine, firing into the darkness toward the muzzle flashes. "Get inside, and stay away from the windows." Jessamine crawled toward the door, her heart pounding. "Yancey, be careful." "Go!" he commanded, squeezing off another shot. Inside, she found Eliza huddled beneath the table, eyes wide with terror. "It's the Donovan's men," Jessamine explained, pulling her sister away from the windows. "Marshal Orwell and Deputy Flynn are handling it." The gunfight outside intensified, bullets shattering their windows and thudding into the walls. The sisters crouched in the corner of the kitchen, arms around each other as the night erupted in violence. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. An eerie silence fell, broken only by the low moaning of a wounded man. "Marshal!" Jessamine called anxiously. "Yancey!" Footsteps approached the door, and she held her breath until Yancey's voice called out, "It's me. Are you both all right?" Jessamine rushed to unbolt the door. Yancey stood there, a bleeding gash across his cheek, but otherwise unharmed. "Thank God," she breathed, resisting the urge to throw her arms around him. "We got 2 of them," he reported grimly. "The others rode off. Flynn's injured, but he'll live. Bullet grazed his shoulder." "They'll be back, won't they?" Eliza asked, her voice small. Yancey nodded. "Which is why we're leaving tonight, not tomorrow. Pack only what you need. We ride in 20 minutes. By midnight, they were miles from Redemption, traveling hard through the moonlit desert. Flynn rode ahead, scouting the trail despite his bandaged shoulder. Eliza rode double with him on his sturdy gelding, while Jessamine shared Yancey's mount, her back pressed against his chest as his arms encircled her to hold the reins. The steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the warmth of Yancey's body against hers lulled Jessamine into a strange calm despite their circumstances. They were fleeing for their lives, yet she felt safer than she had in months. "Try to sleep," Yancey murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "It's a long ride to the next town." "I couldn't possibly sleep," she replied, though exhaustion pulled at her limbs. "Not after everything that's happened." His arms tightened slightly around her. "I won't let anything happen to you or Eliza. I promise you that." "I believe you," she said softly, and realized it was true. Something about Yancey Orwell inspired trust, not just because of the badge he wore, but because of the man he was. They rode in silence for a while, the desert night alive with sounds around them, the rustle of creatures in the brush, the call of a distant coyote, the whisper of the wind through cactus spines. "Why did you become a marshal?" Jessamine asked eventually, curious about the man whose heartbeat she could feel against her back. Yancey was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke, his voice low and controlled. "I was a rancher once, in a small town outside Austin. Had a wife, Hannah. We were going to start a family." The past tense told Jessamine everything before he continued. "A gang came through town while I was away trading cattle. They took 7 women, including Hannah. By the time I got back and gathered a posse, they were long gone." His voice remained steady, but she could feel the tension in his body. "We tracked them for weeks, but we were always one step behind. Found some of the women along the way, but not Hannah." Jessamine's heart ached for him. "Did you ever find her?" "Eventually. 6 months later in a brothel in New Mexico. She'd been—" He stopped, unable to continue for a moment. "She didn't survive the journey home." "Yancey, I'm so sorry," Jessamine whispered, fighting tears. "After burying her, I joined the marshals," he continued. "Swore I'd stop those gangs from destroying other lives. Been doing it for 5 years now." Jessamine understood now his single-minded dedication, his unwavering pursuit of justice. It wasn't just a job, it was a mission born of personal tragedy. "That's why the Donovans matter so much to you," she said softly. "They're part of the same network that took Hannah," he confirmed. "Breaking them is one step toward ending the whole operation." She placed her hand over his where it held the reins. "You're a good man, Yancey Orwell." He made a non-committal sound, but didn't pull his hand away from hers. By dawn, they reached a small settlement called Cooper's Crossing, little more than a trading post, stagecoach stop, and a handful of buildings. Yancey led them to a modest boarding house run by a stern-faced widow named Mrs. Winters, who softened slightly at the sight of the exhausted sisters. "These ladies need a safe place to stay," Yancey told her, pressing extra coins into her palm. "No one can know they're here." Mrs. Winters nodded knowingly. "Room at the back, no windows facing the street. Been helping the marshal's office before, I have." While Eliza collapsed onto one of the narrow beds, falling asleep almost instantly, Jessamine found herself unable to rest. She joined Yancey on the small back porch where he was cleaning his revolver, his movements precise and practiced. "You should be sleeping," he said without looking up. "So should you," she countered, sitting beside him on the rough wooden bench. His lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "I'll sleep when the Donovans are behind bars." "And then what?" she asked, the question that had been nagging at her finally emerging. "After the Donovans, there will be another gang. And another after that." Yancey's hand stilled on his weapon. "That's the job." "Is that all there is for you?" "The job?" Jessamine pressed. "You spoke of wondering if there could be more to life. Did you mean that?" He looked at her then, his eyes conflicted. "I meant it, but I've been on this path so long, I don't know if I can change course now." "Everyone can change course," she said gently, "if they want it badly enough." Yancey holstered his cleaned weapon and turned fully toward her. "What about you, Jessamine Jones? What course do you see for yourself after this is over?" The question caught her off guard. For so long, her only concern had been survival, keeping Eliza safe, keeping their home. The future had been a luxury she couldn't afford to contemplate. "I don't know," she admitted. "I always thought I'd stay in redemption, perhaps marry someday, have children, simple dreams." She paused, realizing how much had changed in just a few days. "Now, I'm not sure I can go back there." "You could go anywhere," Yancey said. "Start fresh somewhere no one knows your name. Is that what you'd do, if you weren't a marshal?" He considered this. "There's good land in Colorado Territory. I've thought sometimes about going there, starting a new ranch." A shadow crossed his face. But it was just a thought. Jessamine could see it Yancey on his own land, building something, creating rather than pursuing. It suited him better than he knew. "It's a good thought," she said quietly. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Jessamine felt herself leaning slightly toward him, drawn by something she couldn't name. Yancey's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. The space between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses, many of them. Yancey was on his feet instantly, hand on his holster, as he moved to the edge of the porch to look down the road. "Federal marshals," he said with relief, recognizing the riders. Flynn must have sent a telegram from the telegraph office. 6 marshals rode into the small settlement, led by a gray-haired man with a thick mustache, whom Yancey greeted as Chief Marshal Holbrook. "Heard you stirred up a hornet's nest, Orwell," Holbrook said, dismounting stiffly. "Got your message about the witnesses needing protection." "The Donovans have more friends than we realized," Yancey explained, leading the older marshal toward the boarding house. "Their men already tried to kill us once." Holbrook nodded grimly. "Well, they'll have to go through all of us now. We're escorting you and the witnesses to Phoenix personally." Jessamine was introduced to the chief marshal, who tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam, your testimony is vital to putting these men away for good," Holbrook told her. "We've got 3 more witnesses being brought in from different locations. Together you'll put the Donovans away for life." His confidence was reassuring, but Jessamine saw Yancey's jaw tighten. He wasn't taking anything for granted. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Dawn tomorrow," Holbrook replied. "Best get some rest while you can." That night, after Eliza was asleep and the marshals had established a perimeter around the boarding house, Jessamine found herself unable to sleep, plagued by thoughts of what awaited them in Phoenix. Would she have the courage to face the Donovans in court? What if their testimony wasn't enough? She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Eliza, and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. Perhaps some fresh air would clear her mind. On the back porch, she found Yancey standing watch, his tall figure silhouetted against the star-lit sky. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked as she approached. She shook her head. "Too many thoughts." "Worried about the trial?" "Among other things," she admitted, coming to stand beside him at the railing. Yancey studied her face in the moonlight. "You know, you don't have to testify if you don't want to. We have other witnesses." "But none who saw them trying to sell both of us," she pointed out. "No, I have to do this for all the women who didn't escape them." He nodded, respect evident in his expression. "You're stronger than you know, Jessamine Jones." "Only because I have to be," she replied with a small smile. They stood in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds and the occasional murmur of the marshals standing watch around the property. "If we succeed," Jessamine said eventually, "if the Donovans are convicted, what will you do then?" Yancey leaned against the porch railing. "I've been asking myself the same question. For so long, this chase has been everything. I'm not sure I remember how to live any other way." "Perhaps it's time to find out," she suggested softly. He turned to her then, his expression earnest. "Jessamine, I have no right to ask this, but when this is over, would you consider coming with me, you and Eliza, to Colorado or wherever you'd want to go?" Her heart skipped a beat. "Yancey, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "We've only known each other a few days, but I feel like I've been waiting to meet you my whole life." The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. This wasn't a declaration made lightly or in the heat of the moment. It was something he'd clearly been contemplating with the same thoroughness he applied to everything. "What about your work as a marshal?" she asked. "I've given enough years to hunting ghosts," he said, his voice low and intense. "Maybe it's time to start building something instead of just seeking vengeance." Jessamine's heart raced as she considered his words. She barely knew this man, yet she felt connected to him in a way she couldn't explain, as if their paths were meant to cross, as if the hardships they'd both endured had been preparing them for each other. "I can't answer now," she said honestly. "But after Phoenix, ask me again." Hope flickered in his eyes, and he reached for her hand, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew those hands possessed. "I will." The moment stretched between them, full of promise and possibility. Then, slowly, Yancey leaned down, giving her every chance to pull away. Jessamine felt herself rising to meet him, her eyes closing as their lips met in a tentative, tender kiss. It was brief, almost chaste, yet it sealed something between them, a pact, a promise, a beginning. When they parted, Yancey's expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. The hard lines of the lawman momentarily replaced by something more vulnerable, more human. "Get some rest," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Jessamine nodded, reluctant to leave, but knowing he was right. She turned to go, then paused. "Yancey, thank you for saving us that day, for being there when we needed someone." His smile was small but genuine. "I think maybe you saved me too, Jessamine Jones." The journey to Phoenix began before sunrise the next morning, a somber procession of riders surrounded by armed marshals. Jessamine and Eliza rode in the center of the formation, protected on all sides. As they traveled, Yancey rarely left Jessamine's side, their newfound connection evident in the glances they exchanged and the way he constantly ensured her comfort. Eliza noticed, of course, her observant eyes missing nothing. "He looks at you the way Papa used to look at Mama," Eliza whispered to her sister during a rest stop. Jessamine felt her cheeks warm. "We've barely known each other a week, Eliza." "Some things don't need time," her sister replied with unexpected wisdom. "You know, I wouldn't mind Colorado. I've heard it's beautiful there." Jessamine stared at her in surprise. "How did you—" "Thin walls at the boarding house," Eliza said with a mischievous smile, "and I wasn't as asleep as you thought." Before Jessamine could respond, shouts erupted from the advance scouts. Chief Marshal Holbrook rode up beside them, his expression grim. "Riders ahead," he reported. "At least a dozen waiting in the pass. Looks like an ambush." Yancey's face hardened. "The Donovan's men. We'll have to find another way through," Holbrook decided. "There's a trail that branches east, longer, but they'll have that covered too," Yancey interrupted. "We need to make a stand somewhere defensible." Holbrook nodded reluctantly. "There's an old way station about 2 miles back, abandoned, but the walls are solid." "That's where we go," Yancey decided, looking to Jessamine and Eliza. "Stay close to me." They retreated to the abandoned way station, once a stop on the old mail route, now a crumbling adobe structure with empty windows and a partially collapsed roof. Still, its thick walls would provide better protection than the open desert. The marshals worked quickly, positioning themselves around the building, gathering what supplies they had, and preparing for the coming fight. Jessamine and Eliza were placed in the most protected corner of the main room, away from the windows and doors. "Here," Yancey said, pressing a small revolver into Jessamine's hand, "just in case." She took it, hoping she wouldn't need to use it, but grateful for the reassurance it provided. "Will they really attack federal marshals?" "They're desperate," Yancey explained. "If you testify, the entire operation falls. They can't let that happen." Jessamine clutched the revolver tightly, fear and determination warring within her. "Then we won't let them stop us." Yancey's expression softened momentarily. "That's my girl." He hesitated, then bent to press a quick kiss to her forehead. "Stay safe. I'll come back for you when it's over." As he moved away to join the other marshals at the windows and doors, Jessamine felt Eliza's hand slip into hers. "He'll be all right," Eliza said with more confidence than she likely felt. "They all will." The waiting was excruciating. Minutes stretched into hours as the sun climbed higher, baking the adobe walls. Outside, nothing moved across the sun-scorched landscape, no birds, no animals, as if everything living had fled in anticipation of the coming violence. Just as the tension had become nearly unbearable, the attack came not with a gradual approach, but all at once. Riders burst from the scrub brush, firing as they galloped toward the way station. The marshals' rifles answered immediately, their disciplined volleys dropping several attackers. But the gang was numerous and determined, and soon bullets were punching through the ancient adobe walls, sending dust and debris raining down on those inside. Jessamine pulled Eliza tight against her, shielding her younger sister as best she could as the battle raged. Through gaps in the wall, she caught glimpses of Yancey moving from position to position, his movements calm and deliberate even amid the chaos, directing the other marshals with the authority of a born leader. A particularly close volley shattered the last intact window, sending glass shards flying across the room. One of the marshals cried out, clutching his bloodied arm. "They're moving around to the back!" someone shouted. Yancey appeared suddenly beside Jessamine and Eliza. "We need to move you. They're trying to flank us." He led them to a small storage room with no windows, its only entrance a narrow doorway that could be more easily defended. "Stay here until I come for you," he instructed, his eyes lingering on Jessamine's face as if memorizing it. "No matter what you hear." She nodded, gripping his hand briefly before he disappeared back into the fray. The sounds of battle intensified shouted commands, the crack of rifles, the scream of a wounded man. Jessamine held Eliza close, the revolver ready in her hand, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure her sister must hear it. "Do you think they'll break through?" Eliza whispered, her face pale with fear. "No," Jessamine said with more confidence than she felt. "The marshals won't let that happen." But even as she spoke, the quality of the sounds outside changed. The gunfire became more sporadic, the shouts more urgent. Something was happening, and Jessamine couldn't tell if it was for better or worse. Then, abruptly, silence fell. A silence more terrifying than the gunfire had been. Jessamine tightened her grip on the revolver, positioning herself between the door and Eliza. Footsteps approached their hiding place, slow and deliberate. Jessamine raised the gun, finger tense on the trigger. The door swung open. Cecil Donovan stood there, blood trickling from a gash on his temple, a twisted smile distorting his face. "Well, well," he drawled, a revolver hanging loosely in his hand. "The Jones sisters, all wrapped up and waiting." "Stay back," Jessamine warned, her voice steadier than she expected. Cecil chuckled. "Or what? You'll shoot me with that little gun? Do you even know how to use it?" "I grew up in the territories," she replied coldly. "What do you think?" His smile faltered slightly. "It doesn't matter. Your marshal friends are either dead or pinned down. No one's coming to save you this time." "Where's Yancey?" Jessamine demanded, fear clutching at her heart. "Last I saw he was bleeding out by the north wall," Cecil said with cruel satisfaction. "Now we can do this the easy way." Or, the unmistakable sound of a hammer being cocked interrupted him. Cecil froze as the cold barrel of a revolver pressed against the back of his head. "I think you were about to mention the hard way," Yancey said, his voice deadly calm despite the blood staining his shirt. "Drop your gun." Cecil hesitated, his fingers tightening on his weapon. "They tried to sell her sister too," Yancey continued, pressing the gun harder against Cecil's skull. "The cowboy loaded his gun and said, 'Not today.'" The younger Donovan's resolve crumbled. His gun clattered to the floor. "On your knees," Yancey ordered, kicking the dropped weapon away. As Cecil knelt, Yancey looked past him to Jessamine and Eliza. "Are you all right?" They nodded, relief washing over them. "The others?" Jessamine asked. "We've driven them back," Yancey reported. "Lost 2 good men, but the rest are securing the perimeter. It's over." Chief Marshal Holbrook appeared behind him, taking charge of the captive Cecil Donovan. "We've got 3 prisoners, including this one," he informed them. "The rest either fled or are beyond earthly judgment now." As Holbrook led Cecil away, Yancey sagged slightly, one hand going to his side where blood had soaked through his shirt. "You're hurt," Jessamine exclaimed, rushing to support him. "Just a graze," he insisted, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "Nothing that won't heal." "Let me see," she demanded, already helping him to sit on a wooden crate while Eliza fetched water and bandages from their supplies. As Jessamine tended his wound indeed, a deep graze rather than something more serious. Yancey watched her face with an expression that mingled pain with something far more tender. "You know," he said quietly, "I was supposed to be protecting you, not the other way around." Jessamine smiled as she cleaned the wound. "Perhaps we can protect each other." His hand covered hers, stilling her movements. "I meant what I said before. When this is over." "I know," she interrupted gently, "and I think I have my answer." She glanced at Eliza, who nodded encouragingly. "We'd like to see Colorado." The joy that transformed Yancey's face made him look years younger, erasing the hard lines that years of pursuit had etched there. He leaned forward, catching her lips in a kiss that promised a future neither of them had dared to imagine before. The journey to Phoenix resumed the next day, with their prisoners securely bound and the wounded tended as best they could be. News had traveled ahead of them, and when they arrived at the territorial capital, they found additional federal forces waiting, ensuring that no further attempts could be made against the witnesses. The trial of Warren and Cecil Donovan lasted 5 days, during which Jessamine and Eliza testified to the brothers' attempts to force them into sexual servitude. Their testimony, combined with that of other witnesses and the federal marshal's evidence of a wider trafficking network, led to swift convictions. When the judge pronounced life sentences for both brothers, Jessamine felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. It wasn't just about justice for what they had almost done to her and Eliza. It was about all the women who had not escaped their clutches, all the lives destroyed by their greed and cruelty. After the verdict, as people filed out of the courtroom, Yancey found her waiting in the corridor, his official duties complete at last. "It's over," he said simply, taking her hands in his. "Is it?" she asked, searching his face. "Or is there another gang waiting for you to hunt them down?" Yancey shook his head slowly. "Not for me. I turned in my badge this morning." Surprise and joy mingled in Jessamine's heart. "You're certain?" "More certain than I've been about anything in years," he assured her. "I've spent too long looking backward, chasing ghosts and vengeance. It's time to look forward." His eyes held hers, earnest and clear. "If you'll still have me." Instead of answering with words, Jessamine rose on tiptoe and kissed him, heedless of the curious glances from passers-by. When they parted, both were smiling. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "That's a yes," she confirmed, "for both of us." Eliza approached then, beaming at the sight of them together. "So, Colorado?" she asked eagerly. Yancey nodded, including her in their embrace. "I know a valley in the mountains where the grass grows knee-high and the streams run clear all year round. Perfect land for raising horses. And a family." The promise in those words made Jessamine's heart soar. 2 weeks later, they stood together on a ridge overlooking a verdant valley nestled between pine-covered mountains. Just as Yancey had described, streams crisscrossed the lush meadows, and wildflowers painted the landscape in vibrant colors. "It's beautiful," Jessamine breathed, taking in the vista before them. "It's ours," Yancey replied, producing papers from his saddlebag. "Signed and registered yesterday in town. 160 acres of the best land in Colorado Territory." Eliza whooped with delight, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched. Yancey turned to Jessamine, suddenly solemn. "There's something else I need to ask you, and I can't wait another day to do it." He dropped to one knee before her, pulling a small velvet pouch from his pocket. From it, he withdrew a simple gold band set with a single pearl. "Jessamine Jones, I know we've known each other only a short time, but I've lived enough to recognize what matters when I find it. You saved me from a life of emptiness and showed me there could be more than just vengeance and duty." He held the ring up, sunlight catching on its surface. "Will you marry me and build this new life together?" Tears of joy filled Jessamine's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Yes," she finally managed, "with all my heart, yes." As he slid the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Jessamine knew that the hardships they had endured had led them exactly where they were meant to be. The path ahead might not always be easy frontier. Life never was, but they would face it together, building something beautiful from the ashes of their past sorrows. Over the following months, they built their ranch from the ground up. Yancey's skills as a horseman proved valuable as they established a breeding program for quality mounts, while Jessamine's practical knowledge of frontier life helped them create a true home. Eliza discovered a talent for working with foals, her gentle touch earning the trust of even the most skittish animals. They were married that autumn in the small church that had been built in the growing settlement nearby. The ceremony was simple but joyful, attended by new neighbors and a few of Yancey's former colleagues from the marshal service, including Flynn and Holbrook. As winter settled over their mountain valley, they found warmth in their snug cabin and in each other's arms. The nightmares that had plagued both Jessamine and Yancey gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the future they were building together. Spring brought new life to the valley foals in their growing herd, crops in their fields, and news that their family would be expanding by winter's return. When Jessamine told Yancey she was carrying their child, his joy knew no bounds. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving intricate patterns of horses and mountains into the wood. By the time their daughter was born, a strong, healthy girl they named Hannah Rose, after both their mothers. The Orwell Ranch had become known throughout the territory for its fine horses and warm hospitality. Travelers often remarked that there was something special about the place, something that went beyond the beautiful setting or the prosperous operation. Perhaps it was the tangible love between the tall, quiet rancher and his spirited wife. Perhaps it was the laughter that rang from the home, or the way they welcomed strangers with genuine kindness. Or perhaps it was simply that Yancey and Jessamine Orwell had both known darkness and therefore cherished the light they had found in each other with extraordinary gratitude. 5 years after they first met, as they sat together on the porch of their expanded home, watching Eliza teach little Hannah to ride her first pony, Yancey took Jessamine's hand in his. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" he asked quietly. "If I hadn't ridden into redemption that day." Jessamine leaned against his shoulder, her free hand resting on the gentle swell of her second pregnancy. "Sometimes. But then I remember something my father used to say, that life has a way of bringing us exactly where we need to be, even when the path seems darkest." Yancey's arm tightened around her as he watched their daughter's delighted face. "Your father was a wise man." "He would have liked you," Jessamine said with certainty. "A man who stands up for what's right, who protects those who need protecting." "I was just doing my job that day," Yancey reminded her. She shook her head, turning to meet his gaze. "No. You were being the man I fell in love with, the man who, when they tried to sell her sister too, loaded his gun and said, 'Not today.'" Yancey smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling with happiness rather than hardship now. "Best decision I ever made." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting their valley in gold, they shared a kiss that held all the tenderness, passion, and gratitude of two souls who had found in each other not just love, but redemption.